This video is about how to identify a good theological sentence that's worth collecting in your own personal collection of theological sentences. And so to demonstrate this, we are going to take a look at two sources. One is Jacob Arminius's Declaration of Sentiments, and the other is William Burt Pope's Compendium on Christian Theology. You should see those on your screen now, and I'm going to open up here. This is from Jacob Arminius, his Declaration of Sentiments, and one of my favorite sections, Section 2, the Providence of God. And in this section, you'll see he begins with a definition on divine providence right here. And it's a fairly lengthy definition. It comes all the way down to, yeah, it comes down a little ways. But anyway, you have that. Now, that would be actually a great addition for your theological glossary, where you have a term and then a very clear definition given to it. But I've actually highlighted a sentence, or actually it's part of the sentence, that is going to illustrate some of the points. The first thing that you're looking for in a good theological sentence is something that you understand. That's the number one criterion for determining what to put into your collection. You have to understand it. You may not understand it fully or deeply, but it needs to fit into what you have already studied and understood. It needs to stand out to you as, oh, that's really meaningful to me. So number one, you must understand it. Number two, the theological sentence needs to expand your understanding. That's what draws you to it. That's why you highlight it. That's why you pull it out and put it in your collection, because it expands your understanding, perhaps just by articulating something that you already kind of know, but you haven't thought of it in those words before. And these words help you to explain it better. That leads to the third point, and that is it needs to be a sentence that you can unpack. It needs to be something that you understand well enough to unpack it for someone else. So this is really what your commentary or your annotations are for. You are collecting theological sentences, and then you are writing a sentence or two or three of reflection or annotation, commentary on that theological sentence. That is in order to show that you understand it, it's expanding your understanding, and you can unpack it. So here we have a sentence that says, God both wills and performs good acts, but that he only freely permits those which are evil. Now, I'm actually jumping into a longer sentence here, but in this case, this is actually a good example of where I'm going to collect a part of the sentence, because this is a pretty long one. It starts all the way up here with beside this. And I'm not going to unpack all of that or comment on all of that, because this is the part that I'm really looking at and is going to help me to expand my study. And I'm going to comment on this. I'm going to write some annotations, something like what we see here is how God's will, his sovereign will, relates to good acts on one hand, but relates differently to evil acts. His will is engaged in both good and evil, but in different ways. As Arminius says, he performs good acts, but he permits those which are evil. That's a very important distinction, and that could be the end of my annotation. So let's go over here to William Burt Pope. This is volume 1 of his compendium. And he also is talking about God's will in relation to sin. And you'll see here paragraph 1 that talking about sin. And he is going to say that this is a great and awful truth involved in the word providence. And here he says that, in other words, and I'm going to highlight this, no divine restraint was laid upon the freedom of the creature in that possibility of its direction, which was towards departure from God. So I'm going to highlight that for just a moment. Okay, there we have it highlighted. And I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to read it within the context of the whole section here, so I make sure I understand it well. But this seems to be somewhat of a, well, it's an important point and somewhat of a conclusion to what he has said already, and then he's going to continue to unpack it. But let's look at this. No divine restraint was laid upon the freedom of the creature in that possibility of its direction, which was towards departure from God. So in this sentence, he is acknowledging that sin, remember that's the main topic here, that sin is the result of the freedom of the creature, which acts in a way that departs from God. All right, so departure from God or from God's desire or his will. But I'm going to focus on now on the first phrase here, no divine restraint. Notice how Arminius said he only freely permits those acts which are evil. Here, William Burt Pope uses the phrase no divine restraint. And here you can see that he uses this Latin, which you can see the word permit is in there. And so he is talking about this divine, what Arminius calls divine permission or free permission. He uses no divine restraint. What is divine permission? It is that God does not restrain, in some particular instance, a free creature from doing something that God does not actually want to be performed. Nonetheless, he permits it, right? So this is helping us. So what I would do in my collection, I guess, in my collection, I would put these two sentences probably one right after the other, or at least in the same category. And that would help me to begin as I continue to collect more sentences. Maybe I'll find a few more in these works, or I'll look at another, say, Richard Watson or some other theologian, and he will have something along the same line, and I'll put another theological sentence in there. And after I've commented, added my own, paragraphs or so on each of these, I have a pretty good, solid paragraph, maybe even a short essay, just by beginning with a good theological sentence that's already been written. And I'm reflecting on it, and it's helping me to develop my own thoughts. So that is why we do theological sentences. That's how you identify a good theological sentence. Again, it's one you understand. It's one that's going to expand your understanding, and it's one that you can unpack in a few sentences.